One of them, I nearly binned it. What is going on? I mean, just let him poke you already and get on with it. There is no way on earth that I would have been skippity-doo-dying down the street with my father hand in hand. Not a chance. I'm definitely going to be using the insult tit-flump from now on. Hello and welcome to another one of my book vlogs. So today is all about my November wrap-up. What did I read in November? November was actually a pretty decent month for me in terms of reading. I managed to get through 7 books and 1 audiobook. That was a total of 2,599 pages. The audiobook was 7 hours and 9 minutes. So I think I've done pretty well there. On top of that, I do read to my daughter. I've managed to read 2 books with her this month as well. One was How I Saved the World in a Week by Polly Hoyan, and the other one was The Silver Arrow by Lev Grossman. The starters don't include the children's books, so it's just my books. I did manage to finish every book that I started this month, although one of them I nearly binned it. I don't know how many times I nearly binned it. But I ploughed on through just in case, and I should have binned it. And I didn't have any 5-star reads either, but I did have a couple of 4-star reads. This is my first time doing any sort of like properly reviewing or anything on YouTube, so you'll have to bear with me a minute because the vast majority of these books I read before I decided to kind of add everything to my YouTube. So I hadn't like taken any notes or anything really, so my memory of the first few might be a little bit hazy, but once I get into it, I'm sure I'll remember it. So the first book that I read this month was The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. The quotes on the book say, "As much fun as the English language will permit," and Bridgerton meets Peaky Blinders. Yeah, Bridgerton meets Peaky Blinders in this swashbuckling tale of scoundrels and society. First of all, can I just appreciate, look how pretty this book is. Calling this Bridgerton meets Peaky Blinders, for me was a bit of a stretch. I was expecting, well, if you've seen Peaky Blinders, yeah, this is nowhere near. It is nowhere near. Any crime and violence involved in this book is extremely mild. The Bridgerton bit I can get. Peaky Blinders, not a chance. It's definitely not the type of book that I usually pick up. If you know me, you know that I am a typical thriller, police procedural type of reader. Those are my favourite books. This one was me going out on a bit of a whim and seeing, ooh, pretty cover and giving it a go, right? And it was okay. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars. It's definitely not what I was expecting. I would say it's a historical romance with a touch of whimsy. Bit of whimsy thrown in, you know? Yeah, so this book is about, I can't say her name, Cecilia Basingthwaite. Basingthwaite. I always say Basingthwaite for some reason. Basingthwaite. Cecilia Basingthwaite. It follows her. She's been raised by her auntie and they are part of the Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels. They're a society of like proper posh Victorian ladies who faint on command and all of this, but they wouldn't think twice about pulling out the dagger on you or ordering a hit on your family, basically. I don't know what I was expecting with this book, right? I was expecting there to be plenty of posh old Victorian ladies, and that they were. What I wasn't expecting was flying houses. They class themselves as pirates, but they don't have boats. They have a magical spell which enables them to fly their houses. That was just wild to me. That was not what I was expecting at all. The whole book, it's a bit of light-hearted nonsense really, but it was done in a way that I actually enjoyed. Usually, I don't know, usually I find romance really cringe and everything, but it was okay. It wasn't like extremely memorable or anything. It was one of those sort of like, at the time I was just like, what is going on? But as the month has gone along, I've kind of forgotten most of it. So it's not really the most memorable book other than the fact that there's flying houses in it. It's very wordy, really, really wordy. Clearly the author has got an extraordinary vocabulary and she was desperate to show it off in this book. I did end up skipping through a lot of paragraphs just because it was just full of words. That sounds like a stupid thing to say, but it was full of unnecessary words words for the sake of words, if you know what I mean. I don't know how to explain that. How can I explain a book and see it was full of words? It was obviously full of words. But I did read it with a smile on my face, you know. Some of it did make me grin, you know. It didn't make me laugh or anything, but it did make me grin. I read it with a slight smirk on my face, you know. The romance side of it, again, right, I'm not a massive romance person, in general, just in real life and when it comes to reading. Romance just isn't my thing, but I did find that romance in this book was a little bit kind of wishy-washy, a bit lame, you know. You get the distinct feeling throughout this book that Cecilia does not like men, but, you know, in the typical character, this one rocks up and it makes her flaps twitch. But she won't give anything up until she does. Is that a spoiler? I don't know. The dude in it, Ned, he goes by many, many different names. He has many, many different vocations. I still, to this day, do not know what his actual name is or what his actual job is. I still don't know. It was quite confusing. The whole book was confusing, but its whimsicalness, is that a word? Did I just make that up? Whimsicalness. It still made it a nice little read. I did enjoy it. But yeah, like I said, while it was enjoyable, it's not anything to shout about. It hasn't made a lasting impression on me. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars. Like I said, I did enjoy my time with this book. Would I read more from this series? Oh yeah, I think I would. Mainly because they've got pretty covers. Oh, that sounds so shallow. It's a good distraction from the dark stuff that I usually tend to read. Sometimes you just need that little bit of silliness, don't you? Do I recommend? Well, it's worth a read. Like I've said before, right? Take reviews and opinions with a pinch of salt, right? Everybody sees things differently. You might think that this is an incredible 5-star read. You may think it's absolute crap and bin it in the first few pages. That's the beauty of the world, isn't it? I thought it was a solid 3. Right, moving on, we have The Close by Jane Casey. This is the first book that I've read by Jane Casey. I probably could have done with starting from the beginning of this series. I've jumped straight into, I mean, we're quite far into the series in this book. That being said, I gave it a 4 stars. I gave it a 4 stars, yet I can't remember. Now I can't remember much about it. Yeah, so basically the deal is with this book, okay, is that some poor sawdust turned up dead, all right? And he was a homeless person. And it turns out that his last known address was for this dear old lady living in this really nice neighbourhood. And she is somebody that takes in these poor people, gives them somewhere to stay for a little bit, and then they move on. But shortly after this guy had moved on, he'd been murdered. And so D.S. Maeve Kerrigan and D.I. Josh Derwent, I said that very Welshly then, is it Derwent or I'd say Derwent, but it's probably not Derwent, is it? Anyway, these 2 detectives, basically, they move into the neighbourhood, posing as a couple, to keep an eye on this old lady and find out what is going on. At the same time, there's other stuff going on. It turns out that there's something even more sinister happening behind the scenes in this little close than what is going on with the little old lady. The neighbours are always watching. It says on the back, right, delicious sexual tension. I mean, there's sexual tension, all right. Is sexual frustration, I would say. I mean, just let him poke you already and get on with it. You know, it was one of those kind of like, oh, do you know, just do it. But despite that, I did really enjoy the book. There wasn't really any big surprises or anything. There was no sort of twists or anything, but there was 2 separate things going on. And I did enjoy that, because had there not been the second thing going on, it would have been a right dull read and extremely, extremely predictable. But it wasn't. It had the extra thing. I was constantly guessing at who the devil was, because living on the close, there's an old lady who's got dementia, and the poor bugger's just terrified. She's absolutely terrified of this one guy, because she has seen him do something, and she calls him the devil. But obviously nobody believes her because she's got dementia. And there's plenty of candidates for the devil character. And I spent a lot of the book just kind of changing my mind, thinking, oh, it's that person, or it's that person, or it's that person. In the end, was it? I don't think it was the person that I was thinking it was. It was somebody that I'd definitely thought of at one point. Aside from that, I can't really say much more about this book. Will I read more from this author? Yes, it was well written. I enjoyed my time with it. I kind of devoured it. I read it really quickly. It was quite a page turner, but I think I would have definitely benefited had I started the series from scratch and got to kind of know the characters, see the relationships building up, because reading it from this point, where the two police officers are kind of wet for each other, you know, it was like, just do it. But there was background, obviously, that I need to be aware of for the whole situation to make more sense to me. But I did give it 4 stars. On reflection, I'd say it's probably more of a 3 stars, but at the time I obviously thought it was worth the 4. This one, The Last House on the Cliff by Anne Wynne Clark. This one annoyed the shit out of me, but I also enjoyed it. It's a difficult one to review, this one. Like I said, I did enjoy it, but also, I don't know. I gave it 3 stars. It was a 3-star book for me. Maybe would I say 2.5 rounded up, maybe? No, we'll stick with 3 because I like round numbers. I don't like the points. Decimal points annoy me. This book follows Laurie, who is the typical sort of single mother who's down on her luck. Everything's gone wrong for her. And it's set in a funeral home on the island of Anglesey. Now, one thing that I did really like was the Welsh language that was thrown in here and there. I did enjoy that. I enjoyed the description of the scenery around them and everything, because I could picture it, you know. I had the impression that this was going to be some sort of really spooky, eerie, sinister, like when it says strange things begin to happen. Ruby, who is Laurie's daughter, Ruby insists an old woman is visiting her when no one else is watching, and a tattered old doll keeps being left for Ruby to find. At the start, there was a big kind of supernatural feel to the book, which I really liked. Yeah, I really wish that they'd continued down that route with this book, because what actually happened was bloody silly. It was pretty ridiculous, if I'm honest. I struggled to like a single character in this book. I just found them all insufferable. And Laurie's reaction to what actually happens is mind-boggling. I mean, I would be like, take that child off her. She's clearly just... I don't know how to explain it without kind of putting big massive spoilers in, so I'm not going to. All I'm going to say is you just wouldn't react in the way that it had, and the whole situation was incredibly silly and far-fetched. And why did I give this 3 stars? I think because it kept me reading, and I liked the location, the setting. There's chapters narrated by the girl. Pointless. You know instantly who the girl is. Not only that, but those chapters give the whole thing away. They give the entire plot away. And it's like you just know exactly what's happened. What you're not expecting is Laurie's reaction to it, because had it happened to me, there would have been police involvement instantly, whether it's because I had been sensible and I had called the police, or because I had beat the crap out of the people involved. The whole thing, I just thought it was ridiculously silly. It started off really well. The first part of the book, it started off so well. And I was like, oh, this feels like... oh, it feels really good. And then as soon as the girl goes missing, it's like, oh God, really? And I don't know. I guess I just didn't feel anything for any of them, and they annoyed me. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's okay. It's an okay book. It had a lot of potential and it just wasn't used. And I feel like right at the end, it was as if the author had kind of forgotten about certain people and thought, oh shit, they're gonna tie them in somehow, and just made a load of crap up and stuck it in, like, and went, oh well, hope for the best, you know. I'm not painting it in a very good light. I bet there's a lot of people out there who think this is a cracking book. So don't take my word for it. This one, however, oh, what a slog. There's 481 pages in this, and I felt every single bloody word of it. This one I nearly binned, right? I nearly binned it. I don't know how many times I nearly binned it, but I thought, no, there's got to be more to it. It's got to pick up. It's got to pick up. And I persevered with it, and it didn't pick up. So I gave this a 2-star. I don't think I've heard the phrase, it beggars belief, said so much throughout the book by so many people. So many people who live in different parts of the UK, all of them, they all said it didn't matter what age they were, where they were from, it beggars belief. That's a big thing in this book as well. All the characters speak the same. They're all from different parts of the UK. They're all different ages. They've all come from different backgrounds, but they all speak the same. It's like the same person talking. Words repeat, like pariah and phalanx, and words were like that were just used constantly throughout the book, and it just felt weird. I'm very frustrated by this book, as you can tell, right? It should have been a good one. I really, really like the idea of it. So basically, it follows 9 high-profile criminals that have been released into society, and because their crimes were so horrific but were committed when they were little kids, they have obviously been given fresh identities and new lives. Somebody from the probation services is leaking the new identities of these people to the family members of their victims. It sparks like vigilante action, basically, not just from the families but from the UK themselves through a vigilante group that is active online. I mean, it's a thick boy, and the majority of this, I would say, is just waffle. It was just unnecessary. There were so many POVs. We're talking each character, so there's nine crims involved here. Bear in mind as well, the crims have got 2 identities, so they're sometimes known as their new identities. They're sometimes spoken about as their old identities. You've got different people within the probation service. You've got the different people in the police. You've got the different people in the family members. You've got the vigilante people. There's just so many different POVs. And the chapters, I mean, we're talking, for example, the chapters are literally that. You just cannot get a handle on any single person. You can't get to know anybody. Again, the same as with The Last House on the Cliff. Not a single likeable character in this book. They were all just horrible. There was one that I thought kind of shouldn't have been on the same level as some of the other criminals, because some of the things that they had done was absolutely disgusting. But one of them I felt wasn't quite on the same level, and it was a bit strange. I liked the idea of the story, but the execution of it was just awful. It just wasn't good. And it made it all too confusing and difficult to read. I didn't have a clue whether I was coming or going half the time. Some of it was just unrealistic as well, as if just not living in the real world. Like, I don't know if it's just me, okay? But how many 16-year-old girls do you think would be happy to be walking down the street with their father holding hands? That I was just like, that just wouldn't happen. No, I can't see no. I know for a fact that when I was 16, there is no way on earth that I would have been skippery-doo-dying down the street with my father hand in hand. Not a chance. Weird. Or is that just me? Is that just me? Is that something that 16-year-old girls are happy with? I don't know. I feel like it's just weird. One of the crims, Emily, her story just didn't add up. The whole time I was just confused by it, because it said that her and her sister were close in age, but they never really got on, because her sister was always sort of telling tales on her and getting her in trouble and stuff like that. But then when it came down to it, apparently she was 9 and her sister was 3, and that's a big age gap. That is a big age gap. You know, in the grand scheme of things, as an adult, it's not a big age gap, is it? But in terms of children, that is a massive age gap. So to say that they were close in age, and that she was 9 and this 3-year-old was telling tales on her and getting her in trouble and stuff like that. I mean, I'm a mum. I've got 3 girls with big age gaps between them, right? And it just doesn't add up. Another one of the criminals, along with the really, really, really terrible thing that he did, he had also been abusing his little brother. But then when he's released and given his brand new identity and whatever, the probation services then allowed him to arrange to go and meet up with his little brother. And that I just didn't... If you've got a brand new identity, are you supposed to go and meet up with your little brother that you've supposed to supposedly were abusing throughout his life. It just doesn't add up to, I don't know, it just didn't make any sense to me. Maybe I'm overthinking it, maybe I'm overanalyzing it, I don't know, but it just didn't make sense. It was very slow paced, it was hard work. The small tiny chapters didn't do anything to help speed it up. All it did was confuse matters for me. I didn't know who was talking half the time, what was going on. Like I said, not a single likeable character. And I find it really difficult then to read a book when you're not rooting for anybody. You kind of just going through the motions of reading then, aren't you? The one saving grace for this book, okay, which is why I gave it a 2-star and not a 1-star, was that the source of the leak wasn't who I thought it was. I had thought about this person at one point, but very quickly discarded them. So it wasn't who I thought it was. So the twist, that's why I gave it an extra star. There's also like lots of spelling mistakes and stuff like that in this book as well, which I just can't abide that, especially when there's been, you know, you've got a whole list of credits at the back with all these editors and proofreaders and stuff like that, yet there's still errors. I did not enjoy this one. The next book that I read this month was The Cabin in the Woods by Sarah Alderson. Or Alderson. Alderson I'm going with. I gave this 3 stars. I do feel that I was extremely misled with this book. Given the cover, and I'll read this to you. In a cabin in a wood, a woman by the window stood. Glancing out, she thought she heard footsteps whistling, something stirred. Hiding here, she fears the night, for what's done in the dark will come to light. She must run fast to escape her lie, or she'll be the next to die. In the middle of nowhere, there's nowhere to hear you scream. I thought I was going in for some sort of creepy, eerie, she's done something wrong. She's hiding out in the cabin and somebody is out to get her and she was going to be trapped there and couldn't leave, and it was going to be all stuff happening and she's terrified, and that's the kind of thing that I thought I was going in for. In reality, she spends very little time in the cabin in the woods. Timeline is like the present. Present is when she's in the cabin, but the majority of the book is focused on the past. I don't usually like the alternating timeline things, right? Alternating timelines, I get too confused by it, but in this book it works, and it is necessary, and you do need it to help you figure out what is going on. So I thought I was going in for a creepy thriller about a girl with some scary shit happening to her. That's what I thought I was going into, but it wasn't. It was a kind of typical sort of rags to riches to rags. Poor girl meets hot millionaire, whisked off his feet, domestic kind of thing. I would say that this book should actually come with a trigger warning because it had it all. It had it all in there. All the things that could set you off, it's in you. Because I wasn't expecting that from the book, it was a shock when I came to it and I was like, oh, wasn't expecting that. Yeah, the story was okay. I would have liked it to focus more on the cabin in the woods, because when it was in the cabin, it did have a good eerie atmosphere about it. There were moments where it had a good kind of bit of tension going on, you know, made you feel like, ooh, what's going to happen next? What I found weird about reading this was I read this book, I almost couldn't put it down. I read it and I read it and I read it, but I read it without an ounce of emotion, which is weird when there's such difficult topics discussed in this book. Yet it didn't stir any emotion in me, and I don't know if that means that, if that says more about me as a person, but I know that had I read it in other books, I'd have probably been sobbing, or I'd have felt something. It was a page turner, and I wasn't bored reading it. It just didn't strike up any emotion in me. Aside from every now and again in the cabin where I was like, ooh, but then that really quickly went away because she was only in the cabin for like 2 minutes. I don't know, maybe it should be the girl who's sometimes in the cabin in the woods. I don't know, that might have been a better name for it. It's a good book, okay? It was an enjoyable read. It just wasn't what I was expecting. Had it been a case of it wasn't what I was expecting, but it blew me away, I wouldn't mind so much. But it was a case of it wasn't what I was expecting, and I just felt meh throughout it. But I couldn't put it down either. This reviewing lark isn't really going very well, is it? None of them so far. None of them have stood out to me. The next book was an audiobook. I tend to listen to my audiobooks when I go for a bath, right? I don't get much time to myself. So I like to have a bath and I like to sit there with an audiobook and that's my me time. So this audiobook is the first one that I have listened to from this author, and it was called A Body on the Beach by P.F. Ford. It is set in a fictional location in West Wales called Llangwelly. I gave it 4 stars. I did really enjoy this book. I wasn't a massive fan of the narrator. At the start, when I first started listening to it, I was kind of thinking, I don't know if I can continue listening to this narrator. But I did get used to him. But it just gave me... being Welsh, it just gave me Fireman Sam vibes, you know, good old Sam Tan. Especially because one of the main characters is called Norman. So it just gave me like proper Fireman Sam vibes. So sometimes it was kind of hard to take seriously, you know. But and the guy's name was Norman. It was amusing. Again, this was a really enjoyable story. Yeah, I don't know, the narrator. I mean, I'm used to listening to audiobooks narrated by the phenomenal Angus King. I mean, what a narrator he is. Like, he just gets that atmosphere, you know, he just gets it. Yeah, he's cracking. This guy, he was alright, but like I said, Fireman Sam vibes, Sam Tan. The story itself, it's your typical police procedural murder investigation. That's one of my favourites. It's one of my favourite types of reads. The characters are quite standard, really. You've got your typical sort of lead female detective who's got a bit of a dodgy past that she don't want to talk about. She's been sent to Llangwelly to help train up a group of police officers who basically have been told that they're only there just for show. Basically, they're like the rejects. You know, they never get to deal with any proper crimes, because any proper crimes that are committed get taken over by region. So these people don't get a chance. So she's been sent there along with Norman to help train these officers up and give them a chance. When this murder comes along, everybody thinks that they're gonna balls it up, basically, isn't it? I had a real soft spot for Norman. Apparently the author has written like a whole series of books about Norman and another detective, so I'm gonna have to look out for those ones. Norman, and I don't know why, I find it so amusing. But yeah, I had quite a soft spot for him. He's just a really nice guy, you know, really nice character. In terms of the whodunit, I genuinely thought it could have been anybody. There wasn't a single point in time where I was like, it's that person, and I was fixed on it. I thought at all times I was changing my mind, constantly thinking, yes, it was that person, yes, it was that person. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's not like the best police procedural I've ever read. I did enjoy it, and I'm definitely going to look out for more by that author, the lead detective. I want to find out what her deal is. I want to know what went on. You know a little bit about it. She has like spoken a tiny bit about it in this book, but I want to know. I want to know what shit she's been up to. Okay then, right. We are now on to my first Christmas read of the year. This one is Eastgate by JD Kirk. JD Kirk is currently my favourite author. I just love his style of writing. It just creases me. It absolutely creases me. If you're easily offended by foul language and insults, he's not going to be for you. I laughed a lot reading this. The outrageous language used just made me laugh so much. So the books that I have been reading by JD Kirk are the Jack Logan books. And Jack Logan's boss is Robert Hoon, and Robert Hoon has got a foul temper and a foul mouth, and the stuff that he comes out with is wild. So anyway, he's got his own little series. This is, I think, the last book in the series, but I picked it up because it's Christmas themed. When a routine trip to an Inverness shopping centre is interrupted by a squad of heavily armed Santas, Hoon, his sister and an old army colleague find themselves trapped alongside several hundred terrified hostages, okay? I like the fact that Jack Logan and his team were involved in this book as well. So they did make an appearance, but it is mostly about Hoon. I gave this book 4 stars. It was a delight. It was an absolute delight. I laughed so much through it. I learnt some brand new swear words. Like, for example, I'm definitely going to be using the insult tit flump from now on. You are an absolute tit flump. I love that. I'd not heard that one before and I thought that was a good one. The descriptions in this book about Cliff Richard and Arnold Schwarzenegger were hilarious. I laughed so much. The whole situation is really quite a thing, isn't it? Like a whole squad of terrorists basically dressed up as Santa have taken over the shopping mall, taken hostages and stuff. Hoon gets out of it. He's not directly involved in it because he was desperate for a shit and got locked in the disabled toilets while they were rounding up the hostages. That's how he's able to get up to everything that he gets up to in this book, basically. This is the first of the Hoon books that I have read. So I don't know if his sister has been introduced in the books before or not. I didn't like her at first. She was... Obviously, Hoon uses some very strong language and whatever, but he's also like a likeable character as well. Whereas Berta there was nothing likeable about her at the start. It just felt like she was just rude and obnoxious for the sake of it. And I didn't like that. But towards the end of the story, I did start warming up to her. And you did see a bit of a softer side to her, which did make me warm to her. But overall, as a character, she's not somebody that I would like to read more of. This was a whole bag of fun though. I didn't give it the full 5 stars, purely because I felt the ending dragged a little bit. It did go on a little bit towards the end because there was like a whole section after the whole Santa Army thing. Yeah, that bit dragged a little bit. But overall, this is great. This is a great book. If you're looking for a sort of Christmas themed book that isn't all about sort of cozy romance and la-di-das, this is a great one. I really recommend this. I recommend reading anything by JD Kirk, especially if you listen to it on audio, because you've got the delightful Angus King, I love that guy, narrating. He does a fantastic job. And my last read of the month is another Christmas one, and this one was The Killer's Christmas List by Chris Frost. I actually finished this one off this morning and I really did enjoy it. I gave it a 4 stars, but I think it was more like a 3.5 rounded up. But like I said, I don't really like the whole decimal point thing. But I did feel like it wasn't quite there at the 4 stars. But it was good. It was really enjoyable. I loved the idea of the killer following a child's Christmas list. He was either like murdering people kind of based on the items of the list or posing them in a certain way to make them resemble the items of the list. That was a new concept and I liked it. I liked it a lot. Again, it was your standard police procedural type of thing. You've got your detective who has a dodgy past, who can't commit it to relationships, who is obsessed with the job, that type of thing, right? It's pretty much, that's the standard thing in these books. One thing I did like in this book was the sort of imagery and descriptions used throughout it. One of the things was, let me just read it. Rain was lashing at the window like death metal drum fills. Now I could literally, as I was reading it, I knew exactly what he was on about, you know, and I could hear that, the way that rainfall was happening, I could hear it, you know. I could imagine exactly how the rain sounded from that description, and it was one that I really liked, because I've not heard rainfall described as a heavy metal drum fill before, and I thought I was quite clever. I also enjoyed, there was lots of kind of British references throughout the book, and it made it all feel quite local and relatable. For example, they were at a farm and there were big puddles there, and he was being cautious not to step in the puddle just in case he ended up like the scene from The Vicar of Dibley, and little things like that, which kind of made me smile and made me chuckle and made me think like, oh yeah, that was funny, you know. And I guess I gave it like the 3.5 rather than the 4, because in the book there were sections, they were kind of like diary entries, but not quite there. That was supposedly being 10-year-old kid talking, but the language and vocabulary used was very adult. It didn't read like a child was saying these things. You knew it was a child because of the situations that it was involved with, and because he said that they were a child. And they were in primary, you know, they were talking about the fact that they were in primary school and this and the other. The language used just didn't fit with the 10-year-old child. With those sections, I was able to immediately figure out who the child was. I even figured out what was going to happen because of those sections of the book. I knew what was going to happen, or I knew what was going to be revealed I also really quickly figured out who the killer was as well, but figuring it out didn't take away the enjoyment for me. I still really enjoyed reading it, and there were still plenty of red herrings thrown in. So even though I knew who it was, there were plenty of occasions where I kind of thought, oh, am I wrong? Is it this person or is it that person? But I always settled and I thought, no, do you know what? It's definitely this one. I did regularly question my choice of who done it. Ultimately, it didn't come as a surprise to me who the culprit was. I really enjoyed this book. It's the first book by this author, like proper book, from what I can see anyway. He's only ever done sort of like studies and stuff like that before, from what I can see. Don't quote me on that. I'm not an expert. I don't know these things, but it's definitely the only book that I can find with these characters in as well. So if it becomes a series, I would like to see it become a series. I would definitely like to, and I would definitely read more. Yeah, I would I mean, this was only released last year, so, you know, if he's currently writing more, I would love to read it. I would love to, because I did really enjoy it. So, that was my month. Let me know in the comments, have you read any of these books? What did you think about them? What did you read in November? I'd love to know. I'd love to check out those books as well, get all the recommendations going. Yeah, don't forget about my book club starting in January. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please make sure to subscribe. I really appreciate all of your support. And I shall see you in the next video.